Hannah Sewell is going to read to us from Matthew in chapter 26.
Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more, and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and elders of the people.
When I was a student, there was a song released by Joan Osborne, "What if God was one of us?" It asked a series of really profound questions. If God had a name, what would it be? Would you call it to his face? If you were faced with him in all his glory, what would you ask if you had just one question? Well, what would you ask God if you had just one question? I don't know what your mental picture of God is. Aloof, distant, remote perhaps, sat looking down on the universe and frankly irrelevant. If there is a God, then he is so other, so distant, so different, so separate. What could he understand about what it's like to live in a world like this? What could God understand about suffering in the way that you do? What does God know about living in lockdown, isolation, or facing coronavirus? She goes on to sing, "What if God was one of us? Just a stranger on the bus." Well, that is the heart of the Christian message. It is what links Easter with Christmas, that God became one of us. That in the person of Jesus Christ, God himself took on human flesh. And in this reading, we discover that God is not aloof, distant, separate. Rather, God knows what it is to live in this world. He knows what it is to suffer. That suffering of Jesus that Ros pointed to as her consolation and comfort as she faces fear. Here we get an insight into it. In the Garden of Gethsemane, we see Jesus isolated, left to face his grief and his sorrow alone. His friends, socially distant, are asleep. And we see here also his real horror over what is to come. But notice this, it is deliberate. Jesus doesn't sort of sleepwalk into this. It's not a terrible accident that has happened to him, not some strange twist of fate or big miscalculation or surprise. Jesus knows what is going to happen to him. He knows what is coming, and it horrifies with him. So, why? Why does he go through with it? Why doesn't he just walk away? Why doesn't he just slip off quietly into the night? Well, a moment ago, we sang why. We sang, here is love, vast as the ocean. Love is the reason he was willing to go through with this, willing to be captured, falsely tried, beaten, executed. A first-hand witness of Jesus' life. One of his friends, his closest friend perhaps, a man called John, records this. For God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him won't perish, but will have eternal life. God sent his Son into the world, not to judge the world, but to save the world through him. God knows what it is to suffer. And God loves you far more deeply than you can ever imagine. But let's sing another hymn together.